Hello, everyone. I wish you a wonderful good morning, good afternoon here from Cologne, Germany. My name is Mark Hebecker, and I work at Maier Vidorno Altios. I have the honor to guide you through this webinar today, and this webinar will examine the topic how a concrete strategic roadmap can help you succeed with your business in North America. For those who are new here today and don't know Maier Vidorno yet, we are known as a service provider for India. In particular, we primarily supported companies from German-speaking countries, so from the DACH area, with their expansion plans to India. And since beginning of this year, we have merged with the French company Altios International, which enables us now to support our customers to enter and expand in target markets all over the world, and not only India. So with 32 own global offices and over 100 trusted partners all over the world, we are now the leading service provider for internalization worldwide. Can we switch to the next slide, please? Yes, perfect. So before we begin, a little bit of organizational matters. If there are connection problems or other technical shortcomings, what can happen with these webinars, you can dial in using one of these numbers here on the left side and can continue to follow the webinar subsequently. You will be muted during the webinar. If you have any questions that arise during the webinar, please feel free to write them in the question box here on the right. We will try to answer them all as best as we can during the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. If there is a question that cannot be answered due to a lack of time, please feel free to write me an email after the webinar. The webinar will also be recorded, and if you wish, we can send you the recordings afterwards. The same goes for the presentation. Next slide, please. Yes, so before we begin, before I hand over the helm over to our experts, I'll briefly introduce today's agenda. My colleagues, ISABELLE COMBE, who is the Managing Director of Altios Canada, and Mr. Bertrand Girard, who is the Managing Partner of Altios USA, will present a strategic roadmap for foreign companies first in Canada and then in the US. After that, Mrs. Combe will conduct an interview with our guest speaker, Mr. Emmanuel Fritsch, who's working as Operations Director in North America for the company Ecomondo. We will learn more about his perceptions and experiences in the North American market, as well as the strategic approach of Ecomondo to establish in the market. In the end, we will finalize our webinar with a Q&A session. And yes, it's great to have you all here. And now, yes, I will clear the stage for Ms. Combe.
Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. So myself, I'm Managing Director Canada, and Bertrand, Managing Partner and Director North America. So we are very happy to be here and to show you and discuss with you different opportunity perspective on the North American market. And we'll be very happy to share with you experience and concrete tips and advices, if we could, to enter the North American market. Just I give you Bertrand the hand for a few information regarding the North American global situation.
Right, thank you, Isabelle. Maybe we move to the next slide. The next slide will be a very long story short. Can you move on again the slide, please? Can you click? Can you move to the next slide? Okay. So just to, it's a very quick reminder because everybody on this planet knows the USA plus Canada is it's the biggest economic power on this planet, and Europe and China. If we can move to the next slide, they are competing for the second place if we look at it, because sometimes some economics, they say like China is becoming the second power, over 15 trillion GDP for China, and it's more or less the same since the British exits the EU. So Europe and China, mainland China, they are kind of around 16 trillion dollar of GDP. So anyway, the first power on this planet remains the USA, which for almost a quarter of the global GDP worldwide, and of course, including Canada, it's really the biggest economical area on this planet. So we can move to the next slide and maybe focus on Canada, and then we will focus on the USA.
Yes, we'll start with Canada. Just a chart to show you the rebranding capacity in Canada. So the GDP reports show further resiliency on Canada's economy, which has repeatedly been proven and can be bounced back since COVID-19 restrictions are lifted. So, but just to notice that the economy just contracted to 1% rate, annualized rate in Q2. So a slowdown of the economy growth, but anyway, an interesting outlook. So we can go to the next slide. That show that I don't know if you heard about the new election, because Prime Minister Trudeau, Liberal Party, just won the re-election on September 2021. So it will lead the next 16 months. So we'll see a different information on different sector for regarding the program. So if we talk about the economy, I don't know if you among the attendants will have a company on the aerospace sector, but he really wants to boost and to help the aerospace sector to recover after the pandemic. We heard a lot of AI sector in North America, and especially in Canada, because we do have a lot of big companies that want to invest into AI strategy. So the government wants really to support the company to commercialize AI innovation. Regarding the energy, because in Canada we do have a lot of energy, but the government really wants to move on a clean energy technology and support this type of company. So also on the battery mineral sector, so the government really wants to develop the center of expertise in this area. When we talk about the environment, we talk about implementation of a low carbon fuel program, procurement program that we start very soon. Car batteries also will be made in Canada, and also the focus will be to for the plastic packaging to be made half by 2030 by recycled plastic. A lot of projects and support from the government also on the satellite ground-based infrastructure and also on the rail sector, because I know next slide that a lot of German companies are very competitive on this sector. So a lot of sector that will be very boosted by the government. So next, is Canada will be back on track? This is a huge question, because as we know, all the labor course, the labor market is very tight. Just to tell you, the employment rate is just 70%, so we'll recover the pre-pandemic situation. And because of the lack of immigration, it's going to be very challenging to hire person, and we'll need immigration on this side. In Canada, all as everywhere, so because we are dependent on the Europe and the US, the production daily and the cost increased very a lot during the pandemic. So we expect to have the prices increase to fall back by 2% next year, or by the very soon anyway. And after, just to tell you that the government really invested a lot into the economy, and through stimulus measure that really boosted the economy. So just to tell after, so it will be next slide. Just the output growth is forecasted to be 4.4% for 2022. So 1 point less than this year. So after that, you can see as a German company a global map of Canada and where the industry are located. So we see the finance and insurance much more on the east, oil and gas for sure in Alberta, retail much more in Quebec and Ontario where you have the clients and the population, and tourism into spreading from coast to coast. So next slide. I decided to see and to show you that different provinces, so Ontario, Quebec, British Columbia, and Alberta, imports a lot from Germany. So I wanted to show you on Ontario what type of project are needed here in Canada. So really much more we import from Germany, from pharmaceutical and medicine manufacturing. After you have the automotive and aerospace sector. In Quebec, it will be the same, but you have also the navigational measuring and the control instrument manufacturing. So, and also the aerospace sector. So it will be next slide, two very important provinces that you will need to focus on. Much more on the west, BC imports a lot of construction machinery manufacturing, but also you see the agricultural manufacturing. So much more agriculture and also construction on the west. And for Alberta, it will be the same, but you have much more oil and gas industries, and you will need the pump and compressor manufacturing and machinery in general. So next, you will see the global, and it will be the introduction for a global discussion among the North American opportunities. So as you see on the map, you will have also 20 cities that are very close to the border, so just 1.5 hour drive from the US. That you see the potential GDP potential for you in North America that's very close to you. That's why that's very important to have a North American global strategy to enter the North American market. So next slide, I will see just a few tips on how to be prepared to have a success launch in Canada. So the relationship is very key in North America, especially in Canada, but you have to take into consideration the difference between the provinces. So it's much more on the relationship selling between the buyer and the seller, much more on the on the price or detail of the price. So that's very key to build a very good relationship with the clients, and also you provide your all the logistics side of your business. Find a good location. So that's very key. So take the time to see the very good location, because if you target a specific area and you realize that your customer are not very responsive and not very close to your company, that will be very challenging. So go where your customer are and where you find the best condition also. Labor law is very important also to consider, because you need to understand the labor requirements and the difference between the provinces. For example, in Ontario, if you decided to go there, you needed to consider that employer must give employee a lot of minimum entitlement. So in Canada, that's different, much more on the compared to certain states in the US. The labor law is very protective for the employee. So after that, I will conclude with the Germany and Canada relation and FDI advantages. So just to give you a brief information. So Germany is the ninth largest foreign investor in Canada, and sector includes aerospace, investment manufacturing, automotive, as I said, life sciences, information and communication, and agri-food also. So the advantages for FDI in Canada and to invest and export also in Canada, it will be a qualified workforce, even if the full employment rate is going to be very challenging, but it will be less expensive than if you are in the US. Also, it's very welcoming environments. If you do have a look at the ease of doing business index in Canada, that's very interesting because Canada is on the third rate among 190, and if compared to Germany, it's a very much more competitive sector to do business and to start a company. So quite easy to start a company, and also a solid bank will support you here. And you have a lot of proximity with the US and a lot of bilateral trade agreements between the Canada, the North America, including Mexico, and also the Europe. So I will give just a few information and a snapshot of the situation in Canada, and Bertrand, my colleague in the US, will move on.
Thank you, Isabelle. Yeah, in New York, from New York, the big question we have for the past almost 2 years, but 18, 19 months, it has been what about the rebound in the US? And definitely it's on its way. We can switch to the next slide. Definitely it's on its way. We had a kind of strange situation in the USA as we had all over the planet. But since 2021 and the beginning of 2021, we became a new president coming into power. So I'm not going to detail every single line on this slide, but obviously since President Biden came into power, as soon as February, January, a lot of executing orders were decided and put in place, and getting there. So those orders, we can move to the next slide. It means, to make a long story short, a lot of money pouring into the USA in many ways. So I will go back to this point later. In terms of sanitary situation, it is important to say that as we speak, it's really business as usual. It doesn't mean it's all over, the COVID-19, but definitely it's back to business as usual. And there are like almost 60% of American citizens, US citizens, being fully vaccinated. Funnily enough, it's a little bit less than it is in Germany or in France, whereas, a few months ago, we thought the US would be 100% vaccinated very quickly, but it didn't happen for some reason. And in Europe, we were probably more efficient on that topic. But anyway, it's business as usual, and it's getting back to normal. And if you look at the plans, I was mentioning before some key decision and consumption, there is an increase in consumption in the US, so more than 10% in Q1. Q2 is the same, Q3 was the same. So, the raise of the economy is it's back really back on track. And thanks to those 2 trillion plan, there are so many zeros, 2,000 billion, so $2 trillion dollars plan. And there are several plans. I'm just mentioning here the biggest one, because it's really related to investing in infrastructure. We can move on to the next item. There are many decisions being made by the government, and we'll go a little bit later on this point. And economy is really on the recovering process. And the GDP for Q1 was positive, obviously, over 6%. And the forecast is to be between 6 and 8% for 2021. So the rebound is more than here. It's there, it's happening. And there are massive investments in infrastructure, on green business, technology. Stock exchange is getting, it looks good. You know, it grew quite significantly in the past 2 years or 1 year and a half. So things are really getting back on track. Another good news, which is what we said here, welcome to the USA and back on climate issues. In the first place, there are a few key elements that you definitely know already, but I just repeat them because they are quite important. These big issues on tax, mainly due to the fight and conflict between Airbus and Boeing, came to an end last spring. So now those taxes, and there were many products from Europe being taxed. This has been postponed, suspended, so now it's back to normal. Socially and politically, there are many turmoils. We all witnessed that during the election process in the US. Now it's kind of behind us. I'm not saying it will not come back again. You know, we don't do politics here, but definitely it's behind at this stage. And the US is clearly back on big topic like climate change, big energy topics, and the US are back in Paris Agreement as an example. It's one of the first decisions Joe Biden made, so it's good. So we can move on to some other topics in this slide. The rebound, this period in the past 6 months, we have been witnessing many interesting topics. In the first place, we have seen the USA opening up again about, you know, themselves about investment. Please come and invest. You know, we have a lot of skilled people. We are the leading economical power on this planet, and it is true. So we are top of the class in terms of innovation. We lead the digital world. Maybe China also, and Europe we're not so bad, but definitely it's a lot of things happening there. There are many skilled people, and what is good about the USA at the moment is that because it is business as usual, people really kind of go back to decision-making process. They are welcoming us, although the travel ban will come to an end soon. But so far, it's kind of hard to travel to the US. But in November, I mean, in 3 weeks' time from now, the European people, I mean, German people, French people, English people, Italian people, I mean, Europe overall, we can travel back to the US, which is a very good news for those who have existing operation or for those who really want to establish something or just visit their customers or visit the subsidiaries. So this is going to happen soon, and this is a very good news. But in the meantime, we have seen many companies from Europe being in touch online through Teams, through Zooms, through go to webinar way of doing things. And many companies have reviewed their strategy. They took time to review the model, to study the value chain, to review the value proposition. And I think it was a very good time to get prepared, and we can move to the next slide, to get prepared to go back seriously to the USA. And as I said before, we can switch very quickly on this slide because I already said it, but we had a kind of drop of GDP in 2020, like most countries, although it was a bit less than most of the European countries. And the rebound is really amazing. It's the biggest fall in many decades, and it's the biggest rebound in many decades too. So that's typically the US, very, you know, able to swallow a crisis and rebound very efficiently on it, like they did in 2008, for example, when you had the financial crisis. So we can move to the next slide. And this capacity to react to a crisis, it's quite amazing in the US, and it shows how and why there is always a kind of dynamic momentum in the US, which is happening today. So now, having said that, I think it's quite important to take a little bit time, although we have only a few minutes, but to go to the US, although it is being reopening now, it's not only like, you know, getting on the plane because it's open and fly to the US and, you know, try to to develop the business again. There is a must before. The must being really understand the market, because the market from East Coast to West Coast, from the Great Lakes to Florida or Texas, there are it's two different, many different worlds if you look at it. And this slide here shows the GDP contribution per state. The point I want to make here is just, you see in green, you have like California on the left, which is 2 billion, more than 2 billion. It's more than Belgium. It's half Germany itself. It's almost France. So the GDP of California, it's a country itself if you look at it. Texas, it's 1.5 billion. It's more than Russia, only Texas. So when you look at this, you have to look, yeah, you know, it's not it's one country, it's 50 states. So this, I'm sure you already know it. And there are so many differences from one state to another, not only in terms of size and GDP themselves, but also in terms, and we can move to the next slide, in terms of what state is doing what, basically. And there are differences. And if you look at the sectors, of course, internet, healthcare, mobile telecommunications, software, you have a list here, where in this list there is no surprise at all. But this list should be also compared to and confronted to the political investment and decision which has been made by Joe Biden in construction, in rebuilding the country, rebuilding the railways, investing in the green business. So of course you have those sectors which you can see on this slide, but you also have the what was decided in terms of supporting a lot with money, $2 trillion. So it's a massive amount of money going to a new USA, if I may say like this. Plus the usual business like internet, healthcare, mobile and telecommunication being very active. So this country, the USA, is going to really be burning in a good way, like, you know, moving fast, definitely. And again, you have to look at sectors / what were the latest political conversation and decision / where it's happening. And we can move to the next slide, because there is a matrix here to make between, you know, which sector, where it's happening, how much public money, and then you can come to kind of consider where you should establish yourself. And on top of that, you also have to look at consumption, because consumption, obviously, the biggest area of consumption it's kind of linked to the biggest GDPs. That's quite logical. But if you look at the 6 regions I pinpoint here on this map, if you add up point 1 to point 6 from New York to Florida, you have almost 100 million people here, making an average GDP per head of like $65,000 per year, which is far higher than any average in Europe, for example. So when we are kind of looking at where to go, yeah, the sector with geography, where the people are the richest and can afford the kind of service you may offer, this kind of combination makes you really in a position to make the good decision when you do your market review, and then the way to enter the market or develop further your market. And then we can move to the next slide and keep on bringing some more information. Okay, here I also focused a little bit, and it is unfortunately I don't have 2 hours to go state by state, but I just want to go back to the point. Different geographies, many differences, many economic differences too, many sectorial differences. So all these parameters, they have to be really taking into account very, very carefully, plus a layer of political, plus a layer of protectionism, plus a layer of kind of USMCA agreement, which is United States, Mexico, Canada agreement, which is quite new because it was signed like 1 year ago. And it implies many new things, and in terms of trade exchange between these 3 countries. And sometimes it can be a barrier for people from Europe in the automotive industry, for example. So you have to really map very clearly all these factors: sector, geography, where it's happening, what kind of agreement between Canada, Mexico, and USA. And this, we can help doing that. And we can move to the next slide, please. I just put this picture because I thought it was a very kind of a interesting picture. Of course, the car industry, it's one of the biggest industry in the US, as we all know. It's millions of cars being sold or bought, depending if you are the car manufacturer or the consumer. Anyway, a lot of cars being bought or sold or bought every year. And one thing is struck me very much 1 month ago. You look at the famous Ford F-150, which is a very famous, emblematic car in the US, pickup. You have others from Chevrolet, all that, but I just pick up this one. Pickup industry in the US, it's the lifestyle of American people. You know, you have a nice weekend, a barbecue, family, friends, and you have the pickup parked in front of your house. That's American lifestyle with a enormous engine, 6-7 liters per cylinder, whatever it is. And now Ford F-150 announced last week or the week before that they would invest 11 billion in the US, on US soil, in 4 factories to build the F-150 100% electric car. So that's a big change and shift in the way a big player like Ford is looking at the market for the future. And we can move to the next slide, because I just took this example because I thought it was kind of illustrating well some kind of move being made at the moment. And I also wanted to share with you that we are in contact a lot and more with the German representative network of, the representative of Germany in the US, and there is a big footprint of German representation in the US, in which we are in contact with. So there are a lot of tools and connection we can activate with Altios and MNV in the US, in line with a strong presence already being established there. We can move to the next slide. And by the way, if you look at this map, it's quite similar to where it's happening in terms of economy in the US. Now, to summarize a few things, in Altios, we have been working in Canada and USA in the past 20 years. We did probably 400 different projects, taking companies from abroad, wherever it is, to the USA. And out of 400, it's very interesting to observe and analyze those who make it and those who do not make it. So now within Altios North America, we have what we call Apollo 1 syndrome. That's a word we kind of find ourselves. And what it means that there are many amazing success stories, what we call Apollo 11, because, as you know, this one reached the moon. And we are very proud and happy to see so many companies, whether it is from Germany, the UK, or France, or Italy, landing in the US or Canada and making a success. But there are more companies not really, hardly struggling or hardly make any success. And that's what we call here in our old jargon in North America, the Apollo 1 syndrome, because we see many people, they don't even, leave Earth. They never reach the moon or the US or Canada. And we see many companies, or too many companies, not reaching the moon. And our job is to make you reach the moon, basically. So now, what we can learn to finish off with, and we can get to the next slide, to avoid being an Apollo 1 player and become an Apollo 11 player. How we make it? How do we make it? There is no magic rules. If we can move to the next slide, that would be nice. Maybe we reach the moon then. The lesson we learned, and we're learning every day, because in a totally disrupted economy with a more digital, a lot of digital impact, with an awareness on green aspect. There are so many things changing that we don't have a recipe to make it perfect. But to be very humble, we know what to avoid. So we want to share this with you. First of all, whatever the size of your company, with no clear vision, no strong strategy, I think it's better to stay home, because it's always a long run. And there is no success if it's not a long run. By the way, Apollo from 1 to 11, the NASA, they tried 10 times before the 11th one to make it. And I think it's really the case to when you go to this kind of market, it's a long run. And there are non-negotiable points. If no strong finance at home and not a clear management style and vision, stay home. If the company mission and the purpose and the value is not crystal clear for yourself, but also for the customers or partners you want to talk to, and summarized in 15 slides like a pitch, if you were a startup, stay home. If the value proposition and there is there, but with no proof of concept and no market test and not kind of approval of, yeah, my value proposition can work, then difficult. And of course, always have to rely on existing partners, whether it's your bankers, insurance, contact, ourselves, our company. You should trust us to share our knowledge and the way to go there. And then we can probably move to the next slide, and I will finish with that. And probably move back to Isabelle and Emmanuel. So embarking upon a US journey requires a few non-negotiable, as I said, but definitely the value chain has to be clearly understood, because the value chain in the US in a certain sector might be very different from what it is in Europe or in Germany. And there are many, many sectors where it is different. There are more intermediation in the process, and I think it has to be taken into account. There are big changes in key factors, so I'm not going to repeat that because we all know it. It's happening everywhere on this planet. If there is no strong commitment and long-term commitment, I think it's difficult to achieve a great success. And I always advise companies and decision makers, CEOs, managers, to be clear on the objectives and to measure anytime the effort they make through the business plans, through some metrics they can define for themselves, so they can always analyze where they stand. And finally, local support is compulsory, at least for legal aspect, because a lawyer, in the US, but it's also true in Canada, navigating into a business without a lawyer, without a banker. By the way, a banker, you need to build up your credit in the US. Even if you are a rich man, you come to the US, well, you are a newcomer, so you have to build your credit. So you will have to finance your business from your headquarters, and so on and so on. So, and finally, there is a big gap in culture. And maybe we can show the latest 2 words I wanted to share with you. Yeah, the US, as European, as German, French, English, we all think we are cousin, but we are not. We are cousin. We are definitely cousin. We are not brothers. That's what I mean. Sometimes we think we are kind of brothers, yeah, but we are not at all. We are cousin. And last word, if we don't think big and structured enough, I think it's better to stay home. Thank you.
So maybe we can, because we're running after the time, we can ask Emmanuel Fritz to jump into the stage and to open the camera and to start the discussion and testimonial for a Commando story, North American story. So good morning, Emmanuel. Just a few questions to introduce. So introduce yourself, Commando, and your USP of Commando.
Yes, thank you, Isabelle, and good afternoon, good evening to all of you listening from Germany. So yes, I represent Commando here for the US and Canadian markets. Commando is a consulting firm based in France originally, and we've expanded into different continents over the last 15 years. We provide mainly two things, consulting services for chemical management and regulatory compliance. So mostly helping chemical and cosmetic companies sell, export their products into international markets. We started around the years 2006, helping clients comply with the European chemical and cosmetic regulations, mostly REACH, and we were offering to international clients like Canadians or US customers the services that they needed in order to sell in the European area, economic area, basically. That was the initial purpose of Ecomundo. Eventually, we grew also a second business line, which is in the software industry. So we have been developing our own software for, again, chemical and cosmetic companies looking to digitalize, be more efficient, and manage the chemical risk with products that they sell internationally by anticipating regulatory challenges and hurdles, anticipating a substance, for example, that may be regulated in the future. I've been leading the US and Canada branch for the last 4 years. Prior to that, my background was, mostly in sales and marketing. I actually started my career in France, working for the subsidiary of Lidl Stiftung company, so a German, well-known German distributor of and food chain, right? I was working and I was raised and born in Alsace, so I have that also cultural similarity, I guess, with a lot of Germans here that are looking to establish a business in the US or Canada. And I've learned a lot from that, multicultural aspect. And I've been in Canada for the last 12 years, and so I'm happy to share some practical examples and also my experience of working here, trying to grow business here, managing a company, a subsidiary for a French headquartered company, would be glad to share any hands-on, a real life experience and business experience that I know over the last couple of years that I can share with you all.
So Emmanuel, why COMBE decided to select Canada as its HQ, I would say, compared to the US, for example?
Yeah, so to be really transparent, originally the decision to settle in Canada, and I was in Vancouver. I am based in Montreal now, but originally the subsidiary was first founded on the West Coast in Vancouver. And the decision was not a very strategic one, to be again very transparent. It was an opportunity. We had a person before me in working in France. She had been a longtime employee and contributor to our company, and so for personal reasons, she had an ambition, a project that she wanted to settle in Canada. And so she had this very casual discussion with our CEO and said, I would be interested in going in North America and building and expanding the business and our presence there. And so that's how the conversation started. And so the choice for Vancouver, and that will be also a link to what you, Isabelle, and Bertrand just said about, making sure that you have the proper good location if you are going to settle. Maybe what I'm saying to you is the perfect counterexample, because initially the decision to go in Vancouver was not necessarily based on sound business metrics. It was more of, a very immediate opportunity that one of our employees was offering us. But we took this opportunity and we wanted to, we created a subsidiary in 2012. From there, we started growing and gaining some clients, in mostly on the West Coast, in Australia, in fact, not only North America, but Australian Pacific clients. We also had a lot of Californian clients, a little bit in British Columbia, but mostly American companies. In the States, again, Washington, Oregon, California was those immediate states that we were doing a lot of business with. Eventually, we realized that maybe the core of activities and customers were not necessarily based in Vancouver. So we had to relocate and find a new office and establishment here in Quebec for also very practical reasons. Well, first of all, they found me. So I was in Montreal when I was hired. So I was already there and willing to take over the business from there. But also with the time difference, Europe and the East Coast, it makes it more convenient for companies usually to settle. If you're based in Germany or France and Western Europe, it is more convenient sometimes to be also located in the East Coast for casual reporting to the head office, and managing time zones with the West Coast as well.
Okay. Just talking about the HR and the US, you just hired this year an American business developer manager. So it was really turning points for your US expansion. Can you explain more? Because your clients are in the US mainly. That's why that was very strategic to hire in the US.
Yes. So we do a lot. Like you said, we have a majority of our clients are actually U.S. companies. So even though I'm based physically in Montreal and Quebec, Canada, we actually almost 75% of our client portfolio is American companies. So that means two things. It means that you do not necessarily need to be based in the U.S. to be successful and to find U.S. customers. It is possible to settle in Canada and do cross-border commerce, especially if you are in consulting services or B2B. But that's a transition to your question, Isabelle. Ultimately, we've realized that if we wanted to take Ecomundo to the next step, and to really grow the business, we had to somehow set a footprint in the U.S. and not just by me traveling around the country several times a month and visiting customers, but also having a solid established subsidiary and personnel in the United States. So that's why we, as you know, decided to work with Altios, and we wanted to find a business development manager, and we found it thanks to you guys. And so he's an American, and we realized, that we really needed someone, an American, to speak to other Americans. As simple as that. You will always be, no matter how long you've been selling or doing business in North America, if you come from the old continent, as I come from, from France, you will, always be looked at as a European, and it's hard for. Ultimately, you want to have a local team, local experts, and people that share common values, common relationships, and links with your customers. And so for us, it was obvious that if we wanted to go a step higher, especially selling software now, we had to hire an American business development software manager. That's what we did. And so we're right into this transition right now of building the business and having somebody local, contacting our customers and market doing market prospection. So we are hoping that this will take Ecomundo from Apollo 1 to Apollo 11, like Bertrand just mentioned, and it's a long road. I've been here 4 years, but like I said, the subsidiary has been around since 2012, so it's almost 10 years now that we've been in North America, and we are successful. But obviously, if we want to be even more successful and really live the American dream, we have to take that step now and set ground into the U.S. That's for us is the next step.
Uh-huh. So just a last question for the next steps in North America. It will be maybe to open a subsidiary in the US, to make an acquisition. What is your strategy for the next years to expand Ecomundo in North America?
Yes, so we're mainly working on customer acquisition. So we have made an investment and hired a sales representative helping us build that market share in the US. We have a strong value proposition. We believe, we're convinced, on the software side. So that's another point I would like to make. Canadians and Americans are very often seen as very self-centric, and it is true. Doing business, having done business with them for a number of years now. But we have, as European companies, have a lot of also value proposition and a real added value that we can bring. And there are still a lot of sectors that are not as mature as they can seem from the outside. So it's important for, especially us, we're in the niche, chemical and regulatory affairs. So we are aware of, we have a few competitors out there, US or, Germans also, and in Belgium mostly. And we're trying to be local and grounded here locally so that we can demonstrate clearly we have a value proposition with our, innovative technology, that we're able to really fast pace a lot of the operations at our customers' facilities, and also that we have a tools and technology that will allow them to do things even faster and be more efficient and make more money ultimately. So with this rationale, with this kind of marketing proposition, we are really hopeful that we will soon acquire some significant accounts. We are currently working on mostly California and East Coast New York areas to build that credibility. Eventually, we are looking as a next step possibly to launch a new US subsidiary. And like Bertrand explained, also that is almost a must-have in your development. I've been traveling in the US a lot, and customers were asking me, so where are you located? Well, I'm in Montreal. Oh, okay. Don't you have any US operations? Anybody in the US that we can contact? So that always comes back, and it's important working with Canadians or Americans that you can show you are local and that you've invested. You've made a significant investment also by wanting to establish there and do business there. We're hoping that with some support from Altios also we'll be able to launch a subsidiary. We haven't yet finalized exactly where, but it will likely be on the East Coast to start with, and I am always looking at California as a possible satellite office in the near future. I think you, Isabelle, mentioned California, the way of California in the U.S. economy. It is, if you look globally, it is the world's fifth economy behind Germany. So it's huge, and it has a greater population, California, than Canada. So just understanding that and how singular the market is in the U.S. is really important, and you have to be local. Californians want to speak to other Californians.
So thank you very much, Emmanuel, for sharing your experience. Maybe Mark, you want to open the Q&A session for Emmanuel. If any company wants to ask a question, and this is for you.
Yes, thank you very much, all three, Emmanuel, Isabelle, and Bertrand, for the insightful presentation. We have received some questions. Yes, I will go over them and put them out there in the discussion round. And I think they are kind of specific, but if you want to add something after one of you have answered already, please feel free to share all of your experiences and information that you have. Yes, so the first question is maybe for Bertrand, ideally, and it deals with the process of finding new partners in the US. So the question is about what you have to keep in mind and obstacles that can occur for foreign companies to approach partners to get in touch with them. So yes, perfect. Your mic is out. We can't hear you.
Sorry, Mark.
No
I
problem.
wanted to be quiet, just listening to Emmanuel, and it was very interesting. And thank you, Emmanuel, for sharing. Very interesting. Yes, Mark, thank you for this question. Very good one. And to be very straightforward, it's the basic. It's really the basic service we offer to multiple players coming from abroad, try to land somewhere somehow in the US. It's partner search. It's the service we sell the most. Why that? And how we do it? Why that? It's because we have many databases in the first place. As I said before, we had 300, 400 different experiences, concrete experiences in trying to find ways on behalf of companies in the US and Canada. So we have strong database. So behind database, there is a strong methodology, which is because the database, everybody can access a database, a free one, an expensive one, but it's not the topic here. The topic is to define clearly the criteria. What are we looking for? And this is where we're good at, because database, and it goes back to what I said, we have to understand, and any company has to understand what it's looking for. And I'm going to the US to do what? So market review, blah blah blah. So usually the way we do a market review. Doesn't mean to be a Bible, like 300 pages, very thick, and then the kind of books you open it and you fall asleep right away. No, I mean a market review with the key components of a sector related to the companies which is asking us to do the job. And then once we have that, and because we have been doing a lot of mission of this way, partner search, so we are quite familiar with many sectors. It doesn't mean we know everything, of course. That wouldn't be funny otherwise. But once we have made this market review, then based on database and a very clear criteria choice, where, how big, what kind, what do they do, what kind of technology they carry, the partner. Then from there, we can really fine tune a very, very precise long list, and then a kind of short list, qualified. And then once this is done, and this is really the outcome of a very methodological process, and I encourage everybody to do that. The second part is getting in touch, the outreach. And I think Emmanuel can tell you a lot about this. Outreach, it's specific in the US. There is a way to talk. There is a way to be short. There is a way to be quick, to go to the point. There is a way, a call in the US. First of all, you can email 250,000 companies. You may only get one answer saying, no, thanks, I'm not interested. So our job is to overcome this hurdle of how we get a response from the guy. But the first way to respond is, first of all, to really be clear on what we need, on what we are searching, and the criteria. So when we talk to people, most likely they would understand the way we approach them. They would understand what we're talking about, and it will talk to them. And then you have the outreach, really the outreach. Hi, I am Bertrand. I am X or Y. I would like to introduce a company to you from Germany. So that's our job. Bridge the cultural gap here. And I will make a long story short, because otherwise I will contradict myself. Then I will have probably 5 or 6 slides with pictures explaining the straight benefits of a solution from a German company. I will maybe not at all talk about techniques or technology. No, I would be a kind of a promotion guy, not a technical guy. In a cultural manner, it's very important to really push the benefit first, and then we see the detail with the expert, the specialist, the engineer, whoever they are. So that's what I would do, and this is exactly the way we do it.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, maybe okay. Maybe the next question is for both of you as well, Bertrand and Isabelle. So this is specifically for a manufacturer of specialized machines. So it's about a niche product for server industry. The question is, would it be feasible to check out a combined presence in North America that covers both the US and Canadian market?
Maybe Isabelle can answer that, but
Yes,
I think
I would say depending on the industry, you could be to have a local presence. It could be in different ways. You can recruit an employee. You can do an acquisition, a little provider, and partner. It could be in the US or in Canada, depending where are your clients and how speed do you have to answer and to deliver your clients. So you could imagine to do a little acquisition on to supply parts of your equipment, I don't know, somewhere to be close to the clients. Maybe your commercial team could be elsewhere. It could be 2 or 3 hours driving. It could be in the US, in Canada, depending on your logistics. The value that you need and your speed, you need to go into the market and then answer. And easy institution to have a quick responsive production matter. So it depends on the industry, but you can consider to be both in Canada and the US, depending on what are your clients.
And to add on a little bit on that, it depends. It's very sector specific. We had few clients in the automotive industry. Well, they are tier 1 supplier to Ford or to whoever player is it. Well, you can you can be in Toronto, you can be in Michigan or Ohio. It's okay. If you are in the consumer goods, in distribution, well, being in the same Toronto and delivering Chicago stores doesn't really work this way usually. So, you know, it's very sector specific, but there are industrial sectors, usually they think a little bit bigger beyond the frontiers and borders. If it's a kind of consumer goods oriented, I would say most of the time, no. If it is like, for example, a service company, or you sell a solution like Emmanuel, yeah, you sell, you get the order, but if there is an after sale service somewhere, then definitely you have to be quite quick, quite responsive, and also be able maybe to invoice in US dollar if you are in the US, or in Canadian dollar if you are in Canadian dollar in Canada. So there, you know, it is sector specific, and this is why I was mentioning earlier on in the presentation. You have to study carefully the value chain of every single sector you are kind of navigating in. And this is the answer to the question, basically. Maybe, Emmanuel, you can rebound on that, because you have the experience on this too, being on one side or the other side of the border.
Yes, well, as a as a small company operator of a subsidiary, this is my everyday. This is my day-to-day, is managing the cross-border, basically, relationships and clients. We have here in Montreal ability to bill our customers, our U.S. customers in U.S. dollars, same for Canadian customers in local currency, and this is really, I mean, a must. Building, you mentioned Bertrand, building trust with clients, with bankers, building your credit history as a company, building your credibility as a person, as a business owner. This is going to be most important. Doing the outreach. Americans especially love small talk. They love mixing business with personal relationships. Do you have anyone at your company who plays golf? If you don't, you're going to need to pay them some golf lessons, because if you're going to do any networking events in the US, you can be sure there will be hot dogs and there will be a golf tournament at some point. So it would be really, really a pity if you had no one who played golf, that you could not do any of those small talk business discussions after the the conference and so on. So those are really everyday examples of what I live here. I did not major from a U.S. business school or a Canadian business school, but I did my my university graduate studies in France, and I very quickly realized that nobody cared. Nobody cared here, because they don't know, they don't know our European schools, except maybe a a very select few, which I didn't graduate from. So, and at the end of the day, it doesn't matter so much, because what they really trust is your ability to deliver, your ability to be trusted, and to be a reliable business partner. So if I have one advice I can give to you on this call in Germany, is find a way that you can Canadianize or Americanize the language, the marketing, find any way, any way that you can tie a connection to Canada or the US. Look in your client history, even a very small project, even the tiniest customer that you once sold to maybe 10 years ago. That will always be more relevant than, from my experience, than saying, we work with the top companies in France or top companies in Germany, because they are really looking for who are you working with here in the US? Who are your clients in Canada? They are very straightforward, business-minded, solution-driven people. And what you did in the past doesn't matter so much as what you will be doing for them in the near future. And that's what they want to hear. So, build your Canadian or American pitch, elevator pitch, outreach, have somebody who is willing to, learn or be trained at making those calls and building those relationships and nurturing those relationships. That, to me, will be one of the key assets that you can do to yourself as a company.
Okay, thank you very much. Perfect. So the next question that we have is with regards to a strategic approach for a company who wants to enter the market in the US and in North America. Due to the high competition in the USA, many companies consider to set foot first into Canada and then move down south to the US as well. Is that can you recommend that as like a standard solution, or is it maybe depending on the industry or other factors for the decision?
Well, just to jump in the conversation here, very short answer, sector specific, but then away in Canada, in Toronto, in Montreal, and Vancouver, because it depends a little bit really on the sector. If you're in the automotive industry, definitely Toronto makes a lot of sense for many reasons. It's a hub there. It's like 50 miles. It's a 1 hour drive from Michigan, so easy. If you are in some other areas, it's very sector specific to me, but it's always a good option to consider.
Okay.
And then it might be not a good option after considering it because it's sector specific, but it's always a good option to consider. In my mind, I don't know, Isabelle or Emmanuel, if you can rebound on that, but.
Yes, it's really sector specific, as Bertrand said, and also even if a lot of companies can consider to test the North American market with Canada, it could very often it's not the answer because if you have all the clients in the US, you have to be in the US. You have to be all the time in contact with the US, and you have to be a USA company based. So that's why it depends on the sector and your clients.
And it depends also on the entry mode. If you want to establish a kind of greenfield investment, this one you have to be kind of where you should belong in your ecosystem near your future customer. If you just want to establish a commercial presence, a sales guy, or maybe you could look at Canada as a good place because there is something which is kind of ignored from far, from the other side of the Atlantic. If you look at, for example, Quebec, it's much cheaper than New York City in terms of, VP sales based in Quebec would be probably a little bit cheaper than based in the Silicon Valley, if you are talking IT or. So that might make sense. Always good to consider this option. Okay,
perfect. The last question that we have is deals with purchasing behavior in the US and Canada. So the question is how the Canadians, Americans like to buy equipment. So through a local company or a European-based company.
Oh, I would say one word, but be locally. US
Locally.
talk to USA, or
Yeah,
Canadian talk to Canada, but it's even more in the US. As Emmanuel said, if you want to deliver things, whatever it is, your value proposition, people wants to talk to a local guy, lady, or whoever, but a local representative speaking the same language as Emmanuel speaks to any of his peers in the USA or Canada.
Yeah.
It's my recommendation. I don't know if you want to comment further on that, Isabelle or Emmanuel.
No, I'll just say that things that you don't often read in marketing books or you don't learn at school, but cliches are important. And I would say that as a German company, one of the common cliches, positive cliches that you will hear is the made in Germany quality, and that is true. And this is well known and well recognized. So.
Yes.
Coming from Germany, and I would say especially if you're selling specialized equipment, that is as a conversation starter, is already a testament to a sort of cliche that people have in mind that if they're buying German, they're buying quality, they're buying reliable equipment, they're buying high-tech machinery, and so on. Again, going back to what I was saying about building that. Trust that marketing language and rationale, and finding a Canadian or American twist that you can add to your value proposition, to your strength as a business, would be, looking really at how do you pitch the piece of machinery, of equipment that you have. How does that compare to what other similar equivalent options that are made locally? And how do you make sure that you have the after sales process, service, ongoing relationship, maintenance, delivery, transportations, all that included in your value proposition, so that you can convince a manufacturing client that your solution, your product is actually of a greater, longer lasting solution for their business. I would really, look at that. I have several examples of companies in mind that sell either equipment or in the manufacturing sector here in Quebec and also in Ontario. Like Bertrand said, depending on the sector, if you're in high tech, maybe you would be looking more on the West Coast, because Vancouver and Seattle are so close geographically and culturally, that sometimes being closer to the Silicon Valley or to Washington State and Seattle, where all the Amazons, Microsoft companies are headquartered, that will be a true asset for a company looking to have a first foot in North America, maybe establishing in Vancouver and doing cross-border commerce with the U.S. Companies just on the other side of the border. So different options that you can consider based on your sector, and don't forget how you can always tie your value proposition to a localized language that people here can understand.
Yeah, and it's always at the end, it's always a teamwork. The best engineer from Germany with no need to comment on quality, because we know it's there, and the nicest communicator locally based. That makes a nice couple usually.
That's beautiful words for the end. Thank you very much, all of you. Emmanuel, thank you very much for taking the time to join your experiences with us and be with us today here. Yes, we come to an end. Everyone who's still listening, please feel free to reach out to us if there are any further questions. Yes, again, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Emmanuel, for your time, and everyone have a good evening and a good day.
Take care of yourself. Bye-bye.
Bye.